Hey up everybody, Robbie here. If my voice sounds familiar, it's because you've heard me in earlier episodes, guiding you through different eras and moments that shape the world. Growing up, every time I watched a historical documentary, I always wondered the same thing. What would it actually be like, or feel like, to be there? To stand in the middle of it, hear the sounds, see the faces, and experience the real atmosphere. Well, that curiosity is what led me to create this channel, a time traveler's journal. It's all about getting as close as we can to history. In one episode we could be in Dresden, experiencing the firebombing. Another episode we could be travelling across the Great Plains of America. Basically, wherever history happened, we're there. And so far on the channel, the episodes have been quite short, so we wanted to try something a little bit different, something a bit more long format. And I'm not doing it alone. Joining me is my co-host Zig, a guy who keeps an eye on weather systems the same way people check sports scores. He's a weather enthusiast in the truest sense. He tracks global patterns, major storms, and the atmospheric shifts that shaped events throughout time. If the weather played a role in what happened, Zig's got it covered. So let's get stuck straight in. Welcome, Zig.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for having me, buddy. Yeah, no, I'm stoked on this, man. Taking it all the way back to the good year of 1666.
Yeah, man, it's going to be interesting, man, just to set the scene for everybody.
Yeah.
It's only a year after the Great Plague, so just when you think you can't kick someone when they're down any further, the Black Plague happens, then a year later, the Great Fire of London. Just imagine this, right? Imagine that you've gone to your local baker's, roughly closing time. You've bought a loaf of bread, you've gone home, you think, oh, I'll look forward to that in the morning. The next thing, you're waking up a few hours later and your street's on fire. And that baker or that bakery that's you've just bought your bread from is literally one of the reasons. 13,000 homes are going to burn down, 87 churches, 44 company halls, and St. Paul's Cathedral are all going to be ablaze.
Like, can you just imagine? Let's just take a quick second. You've been to California. You know how the landscape in California is. I was actually out there during that last big firestorm, the Woolsey fire. That was crazy. I can only imagine how these people felt. Just everything around you on fire. Not just that, but we're talking about the 1600s. We don't have brick buildings, concrete, steel. Like, everything's built of timber. Similar to how everything's built in the United States to this day.
From your point of view, like what happened?
The year 1666 was actually going through what some would call like a drought. So it was kind of a mild, dry winter, which is super rare for the UK in general, specifically London. So there was a really dry period. And not just that, but we're talking about a jet stream overhead that's ripping. So what that's doing is it's causing high winds. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they're going west to east. I'm sorry. Yeah, west to east. Man, this thing just took off. One little spark, man. One mistake on a bread loaf actually started there on, what was it, Pudding Lane?
Yeah, Pudding Lane.
Yeah, Pudding Lane.
Thomas Fariner, the King's Baker, actually, and so what had happened is packed up for the night, and an ember has literally just drifted across in a breeze, in a draft, and it's landed on a bit of like stored firewood, and that has gone up like the fire leapfrogs across streets. And then you look at like what's seen as like a national beacon of hope in St. Paul's Cathedral. St. Paul's Cathedral is destroyed. Basically, the heat's so intense that the lead roof melts, and that lead starts to flow like lava.
I'm sorry to cut you off, bro, but like the people that are listening here in the States, a couple of years back, actually this was probably almost 10 years ago, there was a big fire in Paradise, California. there was cars that literally melted, and the melted aluminum formed a river, and it was, flowing downhill. So, I mean, you can only imagine, that was paradise, and paradise deserves all the help they can get, and I hope everyone in paradise is doing good. But we're talking about 1666, no heads up. I mean, you can only imagine the lead streams. I mean, it's molten metal. You know how scary that is, man?
I've got a few
Yeah.
quotes on basically witnesses that were there.
Let's hear him.
You got Samuel Pepys, and he left some of the most dramatic descriptions of what happened. This is him talking about St. Paul's Cathedral. The stones of St. Paul's flew like granados, the lead running down the streets in a stream. It was an endless sea of fire. And then there was a servant girl. This is her reflecting on it, so she's wrote this in a letter. She goes on to say that my masters sent us to save the plate, but the heat hit us back. I saw the sky as red as blood.
That's
And,
crazy. I mean, I can try to put myself in their shoes and try to envision what they might have saw that day just based off their quotes. But, dude, I don't know if I could. Honestly.
Because we can sit and we can talk about, these houses burnt down, these people got displaced, and what could have happened. But these people were there.
Just hearing some of those quotes, man.
So you think of the people that are on the street, the people trying to stop it. So you've even got like King Charles ends up joining in on the fire prevention side of things during this time as well. And when I say fire prevention, I'm probably being generous. It was basically lines of people with buckets that have taken water from the Thames, passing it along, and then throwing a bucket on this great fire that's already been fed by oil, tar, rope, alcohol. While this heat is, like I say, this heat's so intense that it's turning lead into molten lead, like into almost lava. It's not just the wood and the embers and the thatched roof and things like this. It spreads to the Thames warehouses that are full of oil, tar, rope, alcohol.
Yeah, and I don't know if you heard of another situation with like a local fire brigade. They called them the water squirts, and they were pretty much like these big syringe type deals. Have you heard of those?
It was almost like parish groups, like little groups of people that had designated themselves to take care of fires, because obviously at this point you get fires. It's a city, we still get fires today, but they could never expect it was going to go on to the way it was now. You were basically looking at damages that estimated at 10 million. London's annual income was only 12,000. Give context to that, it was 80% of the city of London was affected by this fire.
At that time, they called it a town, but I mean, if you look at population, like today's standards would be equivalent to what size of city would you say? So let's say Las Vegas, Nevada, wasn't extremely populated, but there was plenty of people there, but it was densely populated, right?
I suppose if you're growing up and you're living in that area, you wouldn't really feel that much different to how a current person living in London feels now. Do you know,
Right.
you think of the expansion of London and the population growth, but the equivalent's still the same. Do you know, the crowded streets, overhanging streets, you haven't got a sewer system. Maybe it was a little less populated because, like I say, the Black Death had just visited a year prior, and was still going on as well, by the way. Yeah, you look at the mayor of London at the time, Thomas Bloodworth. Even his actions could have completely changed the course of the Great Fire as well, because he initially refused to allow the demolition of buildings to create fire breaks. People were suggesting to him that maybe we'd destroy buildings because it's travelling at a rate of knots, and maybe if we destroy some of the buildings it's not quite affected, that might slow it down. But now he was not having it because he was so worried about the economic effect and the blowback he'd get if, for example, the fire was as small as he thought it was initially, and it suddenly decides to tear people's houses down. And it's certain decisions like that, like delayed firefighting efforts and stuff, which it happened over a 5-day period, roughly 5 days, mainly 4 days, and the fire breaks are finally introduced, and they start blowing up houses and creating fire breaks. The fire then becomes under control, And really, you've only got small pockets that are smouldering for months, what like they're just trying to keep on top of, basically. When you consider that 13,000 houses and 80,000 people got displaced, lost their homes and everything, only 6 people were recorded dead. Another reason that this Thomas Mariner, that he got extremely lucky, is because of what could have happened. That the Tower of London at the time was basically a tinderbox of gunpowder just waiting to explode. But like, you'll be able to elaborate on that better than me.
Looking at it from a weather perspective, if the wind been coming from the east, I mean, that whole Tower of London would have detonated. I mean, it could have been pretty bad. And the reason why it would have detonated, I'm sure some of you know, there was a huge cache of gunpowder reserves in the tower. I mean, it could have gone either way, but we'll just focus on the east for now. Not just the Tower of London exploding.
But yeah, well, just to follow up on what you said then about the gunpowder reserves, the amount of gunpowder stored in the Tower of London was enough to fuel a war.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was the national cache, the arsenal that was literally stored for a war.
Roughly this time as well, you're getting the early seeds of imperialism in Britain.
Right.
There's a lot of wars coming up that kind of shape the direction of where the British Empire goes. And you think of like the cultural effect of good or bad, you know, that's a conversation for a different podcast.
Yeah.
But it changes like majority of the world's history because that military capacity is sharply reduced. You think as well, like say with the Dutch War on the horizon and King Louis' expansion of France, it just adds to that vulnerability as well. It almost makes you more vulnerable than if the current ships just got burnt. Gunpowder isn't something that you grow in a field.
Right.
The
Yeah.
import of it, the production of it, it's...
All it takes is one little spark.
But what could have happened is it's an endless list of negatives with a long-term effect, and it could have reshaped what today's Britain is altogether. And you think like, oh, Jesus Christ, how lucky is that? Oh no, it goes on, doesn't it? Because like you know better than me, it could have even gone a different direction, and then you've got a whole different problems on the other side of things as well.
Yeah. I mean, a whole bunch of good came out of it, but there was also a lot of bad. You know, obviously people lost their homes. They needed retribution. They wanted justice to be served. I mean, a special fire court was set up literally from the February of 1667 to December of 1668. They fired it back up in 1670 to February of 1676. Yeah, I had to read that real quick, but like they literally set up a special fire court, and this is going to be for victims and people that had lost their houses on behalf of, you know, some would blame it on the baker, but in reality, I mean, you have an established city with no fire brigade, no fire department if you're from the States, you know, so.
People were blaming like religious entities, like a lot of the Catholics got blamed. The old Protestant Catholic debate, which is a lot of people from the Church of England blame the Catholics for starting the fire, and they were spreading rumours like they heard Catholics talking about how London was going to burn in 1666 and
Right.
all these kind of rumours. And then obviously you've got, like I've touched on before, the French are purring, the Dutch are purring. People were blaming the French and what have you, and mobs started attacking to the point where King Charles had to intervene. But it didn't help the fact that there was a Frenchman that actually did a false confession, which I don't know if you want to follow up on.
Yeah, there was actually a guy who this whole fire, as you guys have heard throughout this podcast, this whole fire was accidental. Nothing was nefarious, wasn't deliberately started. It was an accidental fire from a baker making bread, you know, trying to feed the community. Even though they knew, you know, kind of what happened, there was a guy who actually confessed to starting the fire, which I don't know why you would do that, but he did. And if anybody knows kind of how the judicial system worked back in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s even. If you did anything that caused any sort of loss of life, it was pretty much an instant death sentence. So then that's exactly what happened. He confessed. There was no judge, jury, and executioner. It was more or less he confessed to it. A judge said, you know what? You confessed. You're the reason why it happened. So we're going to execute you. And that's exactly what happened. He was executed under a false confession, which is mind-blowing, but you think about it, and back in the 1600s, early 1700s, even into the 1800s and early 1900s, there was no DNA forensics, no fingerprints. It was more or less word of mouth, right? So they took his word. They took him at face value, and he ended up paying the ultimate sacrifice for that.
Yeah, and what makes it even easier as well is that the authorities at the time, they almost didn't want to take even into consideration that a respected tradesman was to blame. It's because it was during a time of public panic and they didn't want to blame a respected tradesman. And
was right after the Black Plague too, right? I mean, just
yeah,
similar to how we had COVID, right? We had the quote unquote essential workers, similar to this guy, right?
Yeah, and you think with Thomas, like I touched on earlier on, he was the King's Baker, and basically what the King's Baker is, he was the baker for the Royal Navy, which was the crown jewel at the time, do you know? So, could you imagine, like, the baker of the Royal Navy, like, started this catastrophic event? It's beyond reason for these authorities, but a later investigation, like you said, found it as accidental, and after that then, Thomas Fariner wasn't held legally responsible. He ended up working to protect his reputation, and he ended up serving on the fire court, the body that was established to settle property disputes after the disaster, which is crazy, really, do you know?
Oh wow!
And ironically as well, he served as one of the jurors in cases related to rebuilding London, and then he continued as a baker afterwards. So was still obviously respected in what he did because he still ended up carrying on being a baker. You think that night as well, like you think of how lucky this guy was. We're talking really about one of the luckiest men. Despite what happened, he was one of the luckiest men in British history, because when you ran a bakery, it wasn't like a place of work, it was your house as well. So when this fire starts, he's upstairs with his daughter. They ended up escaping. The servant was actually his servant was actually the first casualty, and one of the 6 casualties that ended up dying. So it makes a lucky escape from this fire that was started technically due to his negligence. And then there's all the different factors and how this could have played out, like you said, which you got super lucky about. This guy, honestly, like, talking about rising from the ashes, and then obviously following up on the aftermath, like we've said about the cost it took, and the legacy of the Great Fire, which is astounding, really. Like, modern London building codes that are still in place now originated from this fire.
I'd like to touch on some of those, if that's cool.
Go for it, man. Go for it, man.
Yeah, like you touched on earlier, some of the building materials and construction codes that have been enacted since was like the mandatory use of brick and stone. So it's pretty much all new buildings, regardless of the size, had to be constructed of brick or stone. This effectively banned the use of wood as a primary building material and prohibited highly flammable thatched roofs. So just like you were saying earlier, wood and thatched roofs, no bueno, dude. We got to get rid of that. That's way too flammable. We learned our lesson in 1666, right? But they also did the abolition of jetties and overhangs. And there's some people that don't know the medieval style of jetting. And that's pretty much where upper floors are protruding over the street below. So it'd be like, I guess you can say, if you're in the States, it'd be like a deck, right?
If you think of Diagon Alley from Harry Potter, as trivial as that is, you look at Diagon Alley on Harry Potter, and that was how the streets were built.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not talking with dragons sat on top of banks, but the way that the buildings overhang each other and almost looks like they built the first floor And then there was like, no, we ain't got enough room here.
Gotta make
A
it
bigger
bigger at
floor
the
on
top.
top of that. Yeah, and then let's even take it one step further and build a bigger floor on top of that. So
Like a pyramid, if you were to put a pyramid on its head.
yeah, and another thing as well is like you think of insurance as well, like fire insurance, that came on the back end of this as well. Sir Christopher Wren reconstructed St. Paul's Cathedral and other churches as well, so it's hard to believe that was burnt to a crisp and the roof was completely melted off of it.
Oh, I'm sorry, step on your toes. I was just gonna say there's something called party walls. I don't know if you heard of party walls before. It was one of the building codes, building restrictions for all new buildings after this great fire, which was pretty much a thick, fire-resistant party wall. That's what they called them. You could have it be have a party on one side, a fire could be on the other. It's not going to get you, right? So they called them like a party wall, but they required these in between houses. They're mandated, like they had to be there, which is kind of crazy. Pretty much constructed fire breaks.
It's going to be a common theme, really, I think, this, when we look at these devastating catastrophes and the way that they shape the modern world is mind-blowing. Even things from, like you said, these party walls to the insurance industry to building codes, it's even fire responses. It's so impactful on civilization.
What could have happened is another wind speed that could have taken place, and that's literally no wind at all. If the fire would have just kicked off right there in the bakery, it would have been localized, man. Talk about like a change of history. Would have had no Great Fire of London, 1666. It would have literally just been a bakery fire, which was pretty common for the time.
And then, like I said, like the Black Death, the Great Plague, that's still floating around. And you look at the effect that the Great Fire had on that. If that fire's localised, you've got your medieval slums, and obviously the hygiene speaks for itself back then.
Right.
So you've had this almost cleansing of habitat for these rats carrying the Black Death, and by no means was the Great Fire a cure for the plague, but it played a big part in dampening down and eradicating a lot of the rat population, which slowed down the spread of the Black Death. Genzig, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I just want to basically give a message. Let's get those comments flowing, and we've got some exciting things coming up, man. We've got some great episodes coming out, and there's going to be another couple of voices joining, and there's plenty to look forward to, man. So don't forget to subscribe.
Definitely.
Yeah, just thank you, everybody, and thank you.
I got the wife to subscribe. My grandma subscribed. My dad subscribed. Like, everyone in my family can, subscribe. You guys can do it. Come on now. Put it in the comments. Even I'm curious to know. Robbie has his comment quest. I got mine. So I'm curious to know, what would you guys do in the event of Doggerland from the last podcast, right? But I'm also curious to know if the Great Fire of 1666, the Great Fire of London, were to happen tomorrow, what would you personally do to ensure the safety of the people in the city? And don't forget, guys, hit that button, hit that button.